Does Justin Trudeau have an economic clue? I'm Brian Lilly with Rebel.media. If you watch Prime Minister Trudeau's interview on CBC television, you did see something interesting. It's a worker from the oil and gas sector who was grilling the Prime Minister on what he was going to do to try and help out what is obviously a struggling sector. And at one point, Trudeau returned to a regular refrain. He said, well, absolutely, we want to help you, we want to help the sector, but we've got to diversify the economy. Check it out.
Hopefully the oil is going to start bouncing back, but hopefully at the same time we're going to be able to diversify the economy.
It's not the first time that Trudeau or those like him have said this. It's a regular refrain on the left that we've put too much in the oil and gas basket. We put all our eggs in that basket is what they said during the election. And in fact, at Davos, Sweden, at the World Economic Forum, Trudeau made similar comments. So is any of this based in fact, or is it all rhetoric? Ian Lee is a professor in economics at the Sprott School of Business, Carleton University. He joins me now to take a look at the data. And Ian, before we get into the hard and fast data from StatsCan and elsewhere, let me ask you, does it make the hair on the back of your neck stand up when you hear comments like that from politicians, regardless of who it is?
Well, it troubles me that because he is the Prime Minister, and I think there's a lot of goodwill towards him. I know there is from me towards the Prime Minister, that he's not, because he doesn't have a background in business or economics, fair enough, a lot of politicians don't, but he's not using the resources of the some 700-800 people in finance who are highly skilled, highly trained, who can debrief him and bring him up to speed on the actual facts concerning the Canadian economy. It is just simply specious nonsense to say that Canada is not diversified. We have one of the most diversified economies in the world, along with the United States. 80%, 16 million out of 18 million working Canadians are employed downstream in the services sectors. That's everything in all those high-rise buildings across Canada: banking, insurance, retailing and shopping malls, educators, the 1.3 million teachers and professors like me, 1 million people in banking and financial services, broadcasters like you, the 2.7 million people in healthcare, which is part of downstream services sectors. It's not just Tim Hortons, by the way. And so when someone says that the 370,000 employed in upstream resources dwarfs all the other jobs in the economy requiring diversification, it tells me that these people simply have never looked at the data.
Okay.
Have never become informed on this reality.
Then let's look at the data. I don't need 700 people working in finance to help me. I've got Stats Canada. They publish this stuff every single month on how the economy's doing, how many people are employed, where they're employed, what industries. And you just mentioned one of the facts, 370,000 it is, you said, in extractive industries. Now, that's not oil and gas alone. That's everything, isn't it? Mining, forestry, fishing, everything?
Diamonds, copper, aluminum, molybdenum, all the stuff we dig out of the ground from across Canada, and the trees we cut down above the ground employ 1/3 roughly just over 1/3, or roughly 1/3 of the population of Canada, which is a tiny, tiny, tiny percentage of the total number of working Canadians.
So why do people keep going back to this idea? I know that that there's a lot of money invested in natural resources. It's a great export for us as well. There's a lot of money involved in it. A lot of these service industries, be they insurance or banking or even restaurants and accommodation, a lot of that supports the extractive sector, but not all of it. Not all of it is reliant on that. And so why do we continue with this myth?
I've thought about this because I've known for years. I mean, I was in banking in the 70s. I've been looking at data ever since I started my PhD. I'm evidence-based. I pore over StatsCan accounts, IMF accounts, and so forth. I've been mystified. And so the only thing I can come up with, the only explanation, is that in my view, and this is just a theory, an insight, a hypothesis, is that the environmental groups, the ENGOs as they're called, are so hostile to timber, lumber, extractive industries that they've created this constant line of attack on them, and they've created this urban legend. And let me be clear, it is an absolute urban legend empirically, statistically, factually StatsCan data. And if people don't like that, they can use the IEA data, International Energy Authority data, or IMF or World Bank data. We are overwhelmingly a services sector economy. I said to my students this morning, I've been teaching 27 years, 5 sections a year, over 200 students a year. Not one single student of mine, to my knowledge, has ever gone into the extractive industries. All of them have gone into banking, accounting, consulting, retailing, all of those high-rise buildings across Canada. And one more thing, Brian, I'm mystified that people don't, as they're walking down the street thinking about this or hearing it, that they don't look around in every city, which is where all of us live. Over 80% of Canadians live in the cities. And unless somebody wants to tell me they're digging for oil on the 50th floor of First Canadian Place, or that they're growing cucumbers or creating cars on the 30th floor of an insurance building, and I don't think anybody believes that, I know I don't, then what are all those 16 million out of 18 million Canadians doing in all of those high-rise buildings across Canada, including all of those government buildings that employ 900,000 Canadians?
So more Canadians work for various levels of government than work in the extractive industry. Okay.
3 times as many.
I want to...
And that's government, let's be clear. That's federal, provincial, municipal bureaucrats. That's not healthcare, which is part of the public sector. That's not education like me, which is part of the public sector, but we're not considered part of, quote, government. We're a separate category. 1.3 million of me. 1.3 million of me across Canada called teachers and educators. 2.7 million Canadians employed in healthcare. Okay? And then you've got this tiny, tiny, tiny microscopic small number of 370,000 employed in the extractive upstream natural resource sector. And yet the NGOs have conjured this into that we are a petro state. We're completely dominated by natural resources without anybody saying to the emperor who has no clothes, what are all those people doing in all those thousands and thousands and thousands of high-rise buildings across Canada? What exactly are they doing?
I know when Prime Minister Trudeau made his comments in that interview to the young man that you and I took it differently. You took him as referring to, we've got to diversify the economy, and you thought he was referring to all of Canada. I thought he was referring to Alberta. Either way, he's talking about diversifying away from natural resources. But I looked up the Alberta employment numbers by industry, and I just want to share those with you because they also show that even Alberta is far more diversified than the mandarins in Ottawa and the politicians in Ottawa will give them credit. Before the big oil price crash, it was already on its way down, but before the big crash, December 2014, StatsCan says there were 2.3 million working Albertans, and 172,000 of them worked in forestry, fishing, mining, quarrying, oil, and gas. You move ahead to December 2015, after the price of oil has gone through the floor, there's 2.2 million working Albertans and 151,000 in the oil and gas and other extractive sectors. So that tells me even Alberta's economy is far more diverse than people give it credit for, that it is not solely based on oil.
Indeed, the GDP, because again, you look at the relative share of GDP of each sector. That's where the numbers come from. That's how StatsCan builds the account, the measurement of the Canadian economy. Alberta is the most resource-dependent economy in all Canada. It's 25% of GDP. Some people may say, oh my God, 25%. So let's flip it. That means 75% or 3/4 of Alberta's economy is not based on oil and gas. In other words, it is less diversified. Alberta is less diversified than the Canadian economy, but it's still significantly diversified. And the idea, again, that Alberta is 100% or almost close to 100%, that it's a petrostate, simply is not supported by the empirical data from StatsCan. The ENGOs, the environmental groups, have significantly misled Canadians on this over a very long period of time, factually, empirically, in terms of the relative importance of resources, and more specifically oil and gas, as a percentage of the entire Canadian economy. And they've done it, I think, because they want to raise money from their base, from their supporters, And so they create these inflammatory comments that revs people up and gets people excited and motivated to donate money.
Well, we know that one of the people that used to do that is now the Prime Minister's senior advisor, Gerald Butts, used to be in the head of the World Wildlife Fund Canada, said Canada should move to a zero carbon economy, that we don't need a different pipeline route, we just need no pipeline. So maybe that's part of what is informing Justin Trudeau's comments, is what's being whispered in his ear by one of his top advisors. But
I just want to remind you, one person wrote me, because I talk about this extensively in the media. One person wrote me and said, Ian, have you thought about the consequences of zero carbon? I said, not really. It's a buzzword. And this person was in agricultural science, was an agricultural scientist. He said, all plant life in this world is absolutely dependent on carbon to grow. If you had a zero carbon economy, you would have no plant life in the world. Trees would disappear, plants, grass, all plant life on the planet Earth would vanish in a zero carbon world.
Well, I think that just proves that zero carbon economy is a buzzword dreamt up by people not looking at the facts. Ian, you bring the facts. That's why we like talking to you. Thanks so much.
My pleasure. Thanks.
Ian Lee is a professor at Carleton University. He teaches economics at the Sprout School of Business. If you've got thoughts on this, email me, brian@therebel.media.